What if burning a Marine's dress blues in his own front yard sparked a nationwide movement against HOA tyranny? I came home from deployment expecting peace, but when the HOA president torched my uniform and fined us for the ashes, she unleashed the full might of the United States Marine Corps. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. The familiar scent of sun-baked asphalt and freshly cut grass hit me the moment I stepped out of the car. Home. After months away, the quiet normalcy of the suburban street felt almost surreal compared to the structured chaos I'd left behind. Dad Mike Vance, Sergeant Major USMC, retired, was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, a slight, almost imperceptible nod his only greeting. Years of service had ironed emotion into subtle lines around his eyes and mouth. But I knew that nod. It meant, "Welcome back, son." It meant, "Good to see you." My gaze drifted to the space beside the front door, beside the American flag, snapping smartly in the afternoon breeze. There, encased in polished glass and dark wood, hung my Marine Corps dress blues. The deep blue fabric, the gleaming brass buttons, the blood-red stripe down the trousers, the medals pinned precisely over the left breast pocket. The one I'd received after Kandahar. Dad had insisted on displaying it. "People should see what it stands for, Ethan," he'd said, his voice rough with quiet conviction. Seeing it there, catching the sunlight, filled me with a complicated mix of pride and the familiar weight of responsibility. It wasn't just a uniform. It was oaths taken, brothers lost, lines held. It was a piece of my soul displayed for the world. That sense of quiet homecoming lasted less than a day. I found Dad staring at a letter, his brow furrowed deeper than usual. He grunted, a sound somewhere between disbelief and disgust, before handing it to me. It was from the Homeowners Association, thick cream paper carrying coldly typed words. "Violation notice. The uniform display along with the flag apparently constituted an eyes-saw and did not conform to community aesthetic standards. Signed, Elena Croft, HOA President." An eyes-saw, my own service uniform, a symbol recognized and respected worldwide, reduced to neighborhood clutter. A hot prickle started under my collar. I looked at Dad. He just shook his head, a humorous chuckle escaping his lips. "That woman," he muttered, the name Eleanor Croft spoken like a curse. "Think she's running a kingdom instead of a cul-de-sac." He crumpled the letter, tossing it decisively into the trash can by the door. "Don't worry about it, Ethan. Just bureaucrats needing something to feel important about." I tried to let it go, trusting his judgment, but a knot of unease tightened in my gut. Something about the cold, dismissive language felt personal. Perhaps across the street, behind pristine curtains, Elena Croft watched Mike Vance toss her notice away. Maybe a flicker of something vindictive crossed her face as she saw the uniform gleaming in its case. Flaunting it, she might have murmured to Marcus Thorne, her ever-present enforcer standing silently nearby, his own expression carefully neutral, like they deserve special treatment. Unlike some people who learn discipline the hard way, Thorne shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. 2 days later, the other shoe dropped. Another cream envelope, same impersonal font. This time it wasn't a request. It was a demand laced with threats of hefty fines if the non-compliant display wasn't removed within 48 hours. The humorless chuckle was gone from Dad's face. His jaw was set, the old granite resolve settling into his features. He didn't crumple this one. He placed it deliberately on the table, his knuckles white where he gripped its edge. "They can send all the paper they want, Ethan," he said, his voice low and steady. The dangerous calm before a storm I knew all too well. "They confine us into oblivion. It's not coming down." The knot in my gut tightened into a cold dread. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was a fight, and Elena Croft had just drawn a line in the sand directly across the honor my father and I held sacred. Dad's words hung in the air, heavy with defiance. "It's not coming down." A line drawn. I felt a grim pride in his stance. but the unease lingered. Elena Croft didn't strike me as someone who backed down easily. Still, I pushed the worry aside. We were Vances. We didn't bow to petty tyrants. I spent the next day trying to settle back into the rhythm of home, unpacking the last of my gear, catching up on sleep, disrupted by months of erratic schedules. The uniform remained in its case, a silent testament to our resolve. Then came the smell, acrid chemical clawing its way into my dreams first, then yanking me awake in the pre-dawn chill. Smoke. Not wood smoke. Something harsher. Fabric. My heart hammered against my ribs as I threw off the covers and bolted downstairs. The front door was already open, framing Dad's rigid silhouette against the first gray light. He wasn't moving, just staring out at the lawn. I followed his gaze and the world tilted. The display case lay shattered on the porch tiles, jagged shards reflecting the streetlights like broken teeth. On the grass, where the case should have been, was a smoking, blackened pile. The acrid smell intensified, burning my nostrils, choking me. Ashes, small fluttering remnants of deep blue wool, distorted brass buttons, and something horribly, unrecognizably charred. Beside it, trampled into the damp earth, lay the American flag, dirty and disregarded. Dad. My voice was a strangled whisper. What happened? Who? Who did this? He didn't turn, didn't look at me. His voice, when it finally came, was raspy, stripped bare of everything but a cold, hard fury I hadn't heard since, well, since times I didn't want to remember. They burned it, Ethan. Just 4 words flat and final. My legs felt like lead as I stumbled onto the porch, my eyes fixed on the smoldering ruin. My dress blues, the uniform I'd worn standing ramrod straight, while Colonel Davies pinned the silver star to my chest. The citation echoing in the hushed hall. The uniform I'd worn to say goodbye to Corporal Evans, his mother's tears falling onto my polished sleeve. The uniform Mom had touched with trembling pride the last time I saw her. Before, it wasn't just fabric and thread. It was sacrifice. It was memory. It was honor. And now ashes. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by an icy rage that settled deep in my bones. How do you know who? I asked, my voice barely audible. Security camera! Dad clipped out, finally turning. His face was a mask carved from granite. Caught them clear as day. He led me inside to his small office, the smell of smoke clinging to us both. He clicked the mouse and the monitor flickered to life. Grainy, time-stamped footage from the camera mounted above the garage. 2 figures emerged from the darkness just after 300 a.m. No masks, no attempt at concealment. Elena Croft, her face tight with grim purpose, and Marcus Thorne lagging slightly behind her. I watched, my breath catching in my throat as Thorne smashed the glass case with a crowbar, the sound sickeningly clear even on the recording. Then together they dragged the uniform onto the lawn. Elena produced something. Lighter fluid, doused the fabric, and struck a match. The initial flare was blindingly bright before settling into hungry flames. They stood there for a moment, watching it burn before turning and walking calmly away. Elena, even pausing to deliberately step on the flag that had fallen. I stared at the screen, my hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles ached. The sheer arrogance, the blatant contempt. They hadn't just destroyed property. They had performed an act of calculated desecration. It was them, I stated, the words cold and hard. The HOA president, Dad nodded, his eyes locked on mine. Elena Croft and her lapdog, Thorne. We sat in silence for a long moment. The only sound, the hum of the computer and the crackling replay of flames on the screen. The rage inside me wasn't hot anymore. It was glacial, focused. This wasn't just an insult. This was a declaration of war against everything I and every Marine stood for. As if on cue, punctuating the violation with grotesque absurdity, the mail slot clattered. Later that morning, Dad retrieved the single envelope, his expression darkening further as he recognized the H return address. He ripped it open, scanned the contents, and let out a harsh, barking laugh devoid of any humor. "What is it?" I asked, dread coiling in my stomach again. He handed it to me without a word. Another notice, another fine. This time for the ashes on the lawn, citing a violation of community standards regarding improper disposal of waste materials and failure to maintain lawn appearance. They were finding us for the charred remains of the uniform they had burned. I stared at the paper, the words blurring, the audacity, the sheer calculated cruelty. They find us. My voice trembled, not with fear, but with disbelief and fury. For this, after what they did, Dad met my gaze, his eyes like chips of steel. "They're trying to break us, Ethan. Trying to bury what they did under paperwork and petty rules, trying to make us the problem." I crumpled the notice in my fist, the paper tearing under the pressure. A low growl vibrated in my chest. "They won't," I bit out. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, the first physical contact since I'd arrived home to the disaster. "No, son," he said, his voice resonating with grim certainty. "They won't. They just picked a fight with the wrong family and the wrong corps." The crumpled fine notice lay on the table between us, a testament to the HOA's outrageous nerve. Dad and I didn't talk much after that. The shed fury and resolve simmered beneath the surface, a silent agreement passing between us. We cleaned up the shattered glass, carefully gathered the ashes of my uniform, an act that felt disturbingly like collecting the remains of a fallen comrade, and left the trampled flag exactly where Elelanina Croft had stepped on it. Let the neighborhood see. Let her see. Word travels fast in a quiet suburb, even faster when carried on currents of outrage. It started with hushed conversations over fences, then phone calls between neighbors who'd had their own run-ins with Elelanina Croft's reign. But the first real sign that this wouldn't just be our fight came later that afternoon. An old, slightly battered pickup truck pulled up, the faded USMC decal on the back window catching the sun. Two men got out, older than Dad, their faces etched with the lines of time and service. Vietnam vets, judging by the patches on their worn leather vests. They didn't say much, just walked up to Dad, shook his hand firmly, clapped me on the shoulder with a grip like iron, and stared grimly at the scorched patch on the lawn. "Heard what happened, Major Vance?" one of them said, his voice grawly. "Just wanted you to know you ain't alone in this." More cars followed. Gulf War vets, guys I'd served alongside in Iraq and Afghanistan. Even a couple of Navy chiefs Dad knew from way back. They came, offered quiet support, their presence a shield against the HOA's malice. Seeing them standing shoulder to shoulder with my father eased a fraction of the icy rage inside me, replacing it with a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I'd missed so badly. Then someone uploaded the security footage. Maybe it was a neighbor fed up with Elelanina. Maybe one of the vets with a tech-savvy kid. I don't know who pressed the button, but suddenly, the grainy video of Elelanina Croft and Marcus Thorne setting fire to my dress blues wasn't just our private horror. It was public domain. It exploded. I watched stunned as the view counter on the initial post climbed. Thousands, tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. It jumped from local community pages to veteran forums, then military news sites, and finally, sickeningly, onto the national news feeds. The comments section was brutal, a tidal wave of disbelief and fury. "You don't mess with the Marines' uniform. This isn't HOA rules. This is treasonous disrespect." Elelanina Croft just declared war on the entire USMC. My phone started buzzing relentlessly with notifications, messages from buddies I hadn't heard from in years, all expressing shock and offering support. It was overwhelming, a whirlwind pulling our personal violation into the harsh glare of the national spotlight. The response from the active duty community was swift and powerful. Pictures started appearing online. Marines, young and old, standing tall in their own pristine dress blues. One post went viral almost instantly. A young sergeant ramrod straight, his blues immaculate, captioned, "Burn won 10,000 more. Stand in its place. See Lieutenant Vance and justice for Ethan." Seeing those images, that hashtag felt like a physical blow in a good way. It was the Corps closing ranks, a visible reminder that an attack on one was an attack on all. Amidst the chaos of ringing phones and pinging notifications, a call came through from a number I didn't recognize. Virginia area code. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another reporter, but something made me answer. "Lieutenant Vance," a deep, authoritative voice inquired. "Yes, sir," I replied instinctively, straightening my posture even though I was just standing in our living room. "This is Colonel Marcus Cole, USMC retired. I saw the video, son." There was a pause filled with unspoken weight. "What happened to your uniform?" "It's unacceptable. Utterly unacceptable." I swallowed hard. Colonel Cole, I knew the name. A highly decorated officer, commanded regiments in combat. A legend whispered about in respect-filled tones. "Thank you, sir," I managed. "Don't thank me yet, Lieutenant." The colonel's voice was slow, deliberate, carrying the unmistakable ring of command. "I just wanted you to know something important. You don't start a fight with the United States Marine Corps and expect to win. The Corps has your back. We'll make damn sure this doesn't go unanswered." Hanging up the phone, a feeling stirred in my chest that I hadn't felt since the ashes first settled. Hope. Real, tangible hope. While we were starting to feel the tide might be turning, I could only speculate about what was happening across town. Was Elena Croft still feeling quite so untouchable? I imagined her seeing her own face plastered on the evening news, hearing the wave of condemnation pouring in, knowing her icy composure. Perhaps she scrolled through the venomous online comments, maybe finally showing a crack in her facade. I could almost hear her snapping at Marcus Thorne, who must have been watching the escalating situation with growing alarm, insisting that they were blowing things out of proportion, that it was just a violation of community standards, that she was the one being harassed. Maybe Thorne, seeing the writing on the wall, even mumbled something about an apology, only to be met with her sharp retort. "Apologize? Never. We did nothing wrong." That certainly sounded like the Eleanor I was beginning to understand. But even as I pictured her defiance, I wondered if it felt hollow, if the walls of the petty kingdom she ruled were finally starting to tremble under the weight of the storm she herself had unleashed. Hanging up the phone, a feeling stirred in my chest that I hadn't felt since the ashes first settled. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Colonel Cole's words echoed in my mind. The Corps has your back. This wasn't just my fight or my dad's fight anymore. Elena Croft had lit a match, intending to burn away a symbol she despised. She had no idea she'd just ignited a wildfire. The battle was only just beginning. Colonel Cole's promise, "The Corps has your back," wasn't just words. It was steel. It manifested before sunrise the very next day. I woke not to the smell of smoke this time, but to the low rumble of engines. Pulling back the curtains, I saw them. Jeeps, trucks, motorcycles, some gleaming, some bearing the proud dents of age and use, lined our quiet suburban street. And then the Marines stepped out. It wasn't a protest, not in the loud placard-waving sense. It was something far more potent. Men and women, some in crisp dress blues that shone like beacons in the early light, others in combat fatigues, veterans in faded jackets adorned with unit patches. They didn't shout. They didn't chant. They simply lined up along the curb, facing our house, shoulder to shoulder, forming a silent, unmoving wall of disciplined defiance. It was breathtaking. A wave of emotion washed over me. Pride, gratitude, and overwhelming sense of brotherhood. They were here for me, for the uniform, for the honor Elena Croft had tried to extinguish. The media predictably followed soon after. First, the local news vans, then the national networks. Cameras panned across the stoic line of Marines, standing at ease, their expressions unreadable, but resolute. Microphones were thrust towards Dad and me as we stood on the porch, the shattered remnants of the display case still visible behind us. I repeated what was becoming my mantra. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect for the uniform and the sacrifices it represented. The story, already viral online, now had a powerful visual anchor. The silent siege of Stone Ridge. Elena Croft, it seemed, didn't appreciate the visual. Just after 800, two police cruisers rolled slowly down the street. Lights flashing, my gut clenched. This was it. Her attempt to escalate to paint us and these honorable men and women as the aggressors. Two officers got out, looking uncomfortable as they surveyed the scene. The cameras, the crowd of neighbors now gathering, and the unwavering line of Marines. From our porch, I watched the exchange. One officer approached the senior Marine present, a master gunnery sergeant whose decoration spoke of decades of service. Their conversation was quiet, professional. The master guns likely explained they were peacefully assembled on public property. Posing no threat, Elena was visible now, watching from her own window across the street. I could almost feel her fury radiating from behind the glass. Her call hadn't resulted in arrests or dispersal. After a few tense minutes, the officers conferred, nodded, and returned to their cars. They drove off slowly. The silent line remained unbroken. Elena had played a card, and it had failed miserably. Broadcast live. While the silent watch continued outside, the next phase of the battle began. Colonel Cole connected us with a coalition of veteran attorneys, sharp, dedicated men and women working pro bono. We met them that afternoon in a cramped, borrowed office space downtown. They laid out the strategy, their voices calm, but their eyes flint hard. Multiple lawsuits were being filed against the HOA and against Elena Croft personally. Destruction of private property. Obviously, Sarah Jenkins, the lead attorney, a formidable former JAG officer, explained, intentional infliction of emotional distress targeting a Marine family like this is textbook. But the big one, she tapped a thick legal volume, is the violation of the Service Members' Civil Relief Act. The SC offers specific protections against harassment and unjust actions related to military service, burning your uniform and then fining you for the ashes. That's not just malicious, it's illegal under federal law. Hearing the cold, hard legal terms put to Elena's actions felt like another surge of validation. This wasn't just about neighborhood rules anymore. She had broken the law. We're not just seeking damages, Lieutenant Jenkins added, meeting my eyes. We're making an example. This stops here. The media attention, fueled by the lawsuits and the continuing silent presence of the Marines, started digging deeper than just the burned uniform. Reporters began scrutinizing Stone Ridge HOA's history, its finances, its past disputes, and what they unearthed was uglier than I could have imagined. Days after the lawsuits were filed, the State Attorney General held a press conference. Dad and I watched it live on TV, the knot in my stomach twisting again, but this time with a different kind of tension. My office has opened an official investigation into the Stone Ridge Homeowners Association, the AG announced gravely, following numerous credible allegations of corruption, discriminatory enforcement, potential extortion, and financial mismanagement. My breath hitched. This was huge. The AG detailed reports of exorbitant, selectively enforced fines, homeowners pressured into selling, properties suspiciously acquired by board allies, a pattern of abuse stretching back years, all under Elena Croft's leadership. The fire she lit on our lawn had inadvertently illuminated her own dark kingdom. We wouldn't understand the full picture until much later, but it became clear the pressure was cracking things internally within the HOA's shrinking circle as well. Eventually, word surfaced that crucial financial records, the kind Elena thought safely buried, had been anonymously delivered to the Attorney General's office around that time. It seemed someone close to her, perhaps realizing the ship was sinking and facing federal charges, decided self-preservation was more important than loyalty. The investigation emboldened others. A former HOA board member, who had apparently resigned years ago in disgust over Elelena's methods, agreed to cooperate with the AG's office. Almost immediately, stories surfaced that she was being harassed. Anonymous calls, vandalism to her car. The message was clear. Elelena was fighting dirty. Dad, myself, and a few of the local vets made it a point to be quietly visible in the whistleblower's neighborhood over the next few days, walking dogs, driving by slowly. No threats, no confrontation, just presence, letting whoever was watching know that she wasn't alone either. The final crack in Elelena's dam came swiftly. One by one, the remaining members of the HOA board tendered their resignations, publicly distancing themselves, claiming ignorance, scrambling to avoid being dragged down with her. Within a week, Elelena Croft stood virtually alone, besieged by lawsuits under state and likely soon federal investigation, condemned by public opinion and abandoned by her own terrified board. The siege outside our house continued, but the real fortress under assault now was hers, and its walls were crumbling fast. With Elelena Croft isolated and the HOA structure crumbling around her, the end came swiftly. An emergency meeting of the Stone Ridge homeowners was called, not by Elelena, but by the few remaining panicked board members desperately attempting damage control. Pressured by the looming lawsuits and the state investigation, Dad and I decided to attend, not to speak, not to interfere, just to bear witness. The community center buzzed with a nervous energy I hadn't felt before. Homeowners huddled in anxious groups, whispering, casting wary glances towards the front of the room, where the remaining board members sat, looking grim. Elelena Croft arrived late, sweeping into the room with a forced imitation of her usual arrogance, though the strain showed around her eyes and the tight set of her mouth. She took her customary seat at the head of the table as if nothing had changed, ignoring the hostile stares and muttered comments. The air crackled with tension. We waited outside the main doors along with a small crowd of other homeowners and reporters. We later heard detailed accounts from attendees about the chaos inside. Apparently, the proceedings quickly devolved once the meeting began. As soon as the motion for her immediate removal was read aloud, Elelena didn't wait for a vote. She erupted. Leaping to her feet, she reportedly unleashed a furious tirade. Not defending herself, but attacking everyone else. She hurled accusations at the remaining board members, dredging up old grievances, spitting venom about incompetence and betrayal. She threatened lawsuits, exposure, anything she could grasp onto. Witnesses described it not as the calculated maneuvering of a leader, but the desperate, cornered, lashing out of a tyrant, losing her grip. Security guards hovered nearby as her voice rose to a near shriek, but her power was broken. The legal notices were irrefutable, the investigation undeniable, and her support non-existent. Faced with the inevitable, presented with the resignation papers drafted by the HOA's terrified legal counsel, likely seeing it as the only way to potentially mitigate damages, she finally snatched the pen. Her signature, they said, was a jagged slash across the page before she threw the pen down. That explained the mask of white-hot fury and utter humiliation on her face when she finally emerged from the building. We waited outside the main doors along with a small crowd of other homeowners and reporters. Then she emerged. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a paler and a trembling rage she barely contained. Her eyes darted around, taking in the onlookers, the cameras, and then us, standing near the curb, silent and watchful as they had been for days, was a contingent of Marines in full dress blues. Her gaze locked onto them. For a heartbeat, she froze. No shouts, no jeers, just their disciplined presence, their unwavering stare. It was, I realized, a more potent condemnation than any outburst could have been. They were the embodiment of the honor she had trampled, silently witnessing her fall. The sight seemed to break whatever composure she had left. Head down, practically scurrying, Elena Croft hurried to her expensive car, ignoring the reporters' shouted questions, and sped away from the community she had ruled like a thief. She had forced others to submit. Now she was the one fleeing in disgrace. Her removal wasn't the end of the story for the HOA itself. However, the damage was done. Crippled by lawsuits, facing staggering legal fees, insurance companies refused to cover, and tainted by the corruption investigation, the Stone Ridge Homeowners Association was beyond saving. Within weeks, the homeowners voted overwhelmingly. Dissolve it. Erase the entire structure Elena had used to exert her control. Stone Ridge was free. Elena Croft vanished from public view. Swallowed by the legal battles and disgrace she had brought upon herself, she had picked a fight with the wrong people. She had desecrated a symbol. She had lost. And the Marine Corps, as Dad had grimly predicted, never forgets an insult to its honor. With Eleanor Croft gone and the HOA dissolved, a semblance of peace returned to Stone Ridge, but the echoes of the fight lingered. The scorched patch on our lawn slowly began to regrow, but the memory remained. Then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, Colonel Cole paid us a visit. He arrived not in uniform, but as a fellow Marine, carrying a garment bag with a reverence that told me what was inside before he even spoke. He presented me with a new set of Marine Corps dress blues, perfectly tailored. As I took it, feeling the familiar weight and texture, he directed my attention to the inside lining. There, embroidered in subtle gold thread, were the names of the men from my unit who never made it home. Evans, Garcia, Miller, names etched permanently into my memory, now stitched in the very fabric of my honor. My breath caught. Tears pricked my eyes as I ran my fingers over the stitching. "The Corps takes care of its own, son," Colonel Cole said quietly, his hand firm on my shoulder. Putting on that uniform felt like putting on armor, not against bullets, but against dishonor infused with the spirit of my fallen brothers. The fight, however, hadn't ended with Elena's downfall. Our ordeal had struck a nerve nationwide, sparking a conversation about HOA overreach, especially concerning military families. Veterans groups, lawmakers, and ordinary citizens demanded change. What happened on our lawn became a catalyst. Soon, a bipartisan bill was being drafted in Washington. Officially, the Military Service Honor Act, but quickly nicknamed the Vance Act by the press. It aimed to prevent HOAs from prohibiting displays of military service, flags, uniforms, memorials. Dad and I traveled to the Capitol, sitting stunned in the gallery as we watched lawmakers from both sides of the aisle speak passionately about respecting those who serve before passing the act with overwhelming support. A standing ovation filled the chamber. It wasn't just our victory. It was a victory for every service member who had ever felt their sacrifice unwelcome in their own neighborhood. In the weeks following the Vance Act becoming law, a quiet movement spread. Photos appeared online from all 50 states. Homeowners proudly displaying military flags, framed uniforms, even single-dress blue jackets on their porches. A silent, powerful message of solidarity and defiance against petty tyranny. The fire Elena lit had indeed started something bigger than she ever imagined. Months later, a large gathering was organized in a park downtown. Veterans, families, supporters. It was meant to celebrate the passage of the Vance Act, but it felt like more. A final collective affirmation. Standing before them, wearing my new uniform, the names of my brothers resting against my heart, I spoke. This was never just about a uniform, I began, my voice steady. It was about the honor it represents. It was about the sacrifices woven into its fabric. It was about every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine told their service wasn't welcome, or that their symbols of sacrifice were an eyes saw. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Young, old, unformed, civilian. There are those who will never understand what this uniform truly means, but we do. And we learned that when they try to dishonor one of us, they answer to all of us. A moment of silence hung in the air. Then a single voice cut through it. "See?" Instantly it became a roar, echoing across the park. See, the sound washed over me, a powerful tide of brotherhood, resilience, and victory. The lesson was clear. Honor had been challenged, and honor had been restored.